All right, so welcome everybody. We have Dr. Brent Brookbush from the Brookbush Institute with us today, and we're going to do 6 board, 6 questions, and then just kind of go from there. Are you ready?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. I see your board, so I'm just waiting for what comes up. I'm like, how is he going to attack me?
All right, so name, occupation, location, specialization.
All right, my name is Brent Brookbush, as probably most of you guys know. My occupation is an interesting conversation. It gets harder and harder to explain as I keep adding things to my resume. I think what most of you guys probably would call me now is like leader or president or chief executive officer of the Brookbush Institute. That is my primary role. I do still see patients as a physical therapist. And obviously I still teach classes. And I still do a lot of writing. So I guess author and educator is in there somewhere too. Would you say location? I'm in New York City. I love the city. I am a city kid through and through. It's funny, I'm very tough when it comes to certain things. And then like a total snowflake when it comes to the wilderness, which I think is a little hilarious. Like I'm kind of allergic to mosquitoes, so try to stay away from those. As you guys can tell from my part vampire heritage, I try to stay out of the sun. So my location being in the city is very fit to me. And then what was your last question? It was location and then
Specialization.
Specialization. So my specialization is definitely on the sports medicine side, right? So I'm a physical therapist and I'm a trainer. So I kind of run that gamut from, you know, rehab to fitness to sports performance. And I think where that really limits is like, if you ask me about neuro, if you ask me about wound care, if you ask me about acute care, it's been a long time since I've looked at any of that stuff. And although I can still identify red flags, you know, as a physical therapist, like I wouldn't be comfortable treating those conditions anymore.
Okay, cool. So how did you get into that field?
Okay, so yeah, my journey has definitely, if I wrote down my journey on paper, it wouldn't make any sense. You know, I started out like a lot of people don't know this about me. I actually started out at a performing arts high school as kind of like a gifted student jazz trombone player. Super skinny kid. I was like 6'1", 135, 140 when I started high school. Beanpole fit. So, you know, before I had gone to the academy, which is a magnet school for music, as well as theater and some other stuff, right? Some performing arts stuff. Before I went there, I went to a normal high school and I got picked on as a skinny kid and got called beanpole and all that stuff. So that led me into the exercise stuff, right? So I was a skinny kid who exercised and played jazz trombone. And somewhere along the line, I got into the whole supplement thing, which I know a lot of guys do who are trying to get big. And one of the guy at the supplement store said, you know, you can make money teaching other people how to work out. And he gave me like this flyer for like a personal training certification or something. Nice. What that ended up turning into is personal training. And in my early adulthood, we're talking like 18 to 21, became like my waitering job. So I was always trying to pull together this jazz trombone career, right? And I got a full tuition ride to go to school for jazz trombone. Nice. I was doing personal training to make money because, you know, part-time personal training money is pretty good when you compare it to like part-time working at like Subway or something, right? So I end up staying in that kind of realm for a little while, right? I'm part-time personal training, working on my jazz career, get to the point where I get a full tuition ride to follow my dream and come out to New York, right? So I got a full tuition ride to play jazz trombone at a university here in New York and study with the greats of the greats. And sure, in a very strange set of events, within 5 weeks of moving to New York, I end up in World Trade Center 3 when the planes hit the building, and end up with post-traumatic stress disorder and a whole host of psychological issues to deal with amongst being in this big new city. And then 6 months later, I tear this muscle in my face and end my jazz career. All right, so this ends up creating a lot of chaos in my life. And the reason why those two things are important juxtaposed is because I end up not wanting to go back home to Vegas.
Yeah.
because when I went back to Vegas, nobody could understand what I had just gone through with 9/11, right? So I was going through something pretty harsh, right?
Yeah.
The recovery from that was pretty harsh, but in New York, we were all going through it together. Like New York it felt very different then.
I'm sure.
In Vegas, I just felt like I was getting asked the most insensitive questions. Nobody understood what I was going through. I was like, screw this. I'm actually going to go back to New York.
Yeah.
But then when I blew out my chops, right, is what they call it in the jazz world, when I blew out my chops, and all of a sudden I lose my scholarship, I'm not going to school anymore, I have to make a living. Well, and not just a living, but a New York, New Jersey lifestyle living. I let the personal training thing take on full time. So that kind of shifts me in that direction. Now, all of a sudden, I'm very much in the fitness world. A few years later, I end up at New York Sports Club, and I have to go through their training and development program, and something dawns on me that I want to do that.
Yeah.
And it was the teaching thing.
Okay.
Right? So I ended up getting an addition. I ended up getting part of that training and development program, and that started my education career. And that now you can kind of see where I went from jazz to fitness to like now all of a sudden this love of education and being back in front of the room, which I think brought me back a little bit to that performance thing.
Yeah.
Right? That I loved so much because I was a solo jazz trombone player. So now you have education and fitness, but I don't have any degrees, and I'm teaching trainers. So I start going back for degrees. And then a few years later, like, you know, my 20s were definitely tough going through that whole rigmarole.
I bet.
And I think a couple other pivotal moments that happened is one, I end up being introduced to Mike Clark, who's the guy who created the OPT model and the corrective exercise specialist model for NASM. And he gives a presentation to the training and development program on what would become the CES program. This is before the CES certification even exists.
That's awesome.
So I kind of fell in love with it because it was like something for my very analytical brain to latch onto. If you guys have never done the CES program, you've never looked at the Brookbush Institute stuff, one thing that's a little different about those approaches is they're very systematic.
Yeah.
It's very much like assessment. You find a sign, this is how you break down the sign, and this is how you address the things that you just broke down, right? And all of a sudden my analytical mind was like, all right, I can get with this. Whereas we all know that like sometimes hypertrophy and weight loss can be like a little bit of a winding path. It's a little harder to be super, super analytical about that stuff.
Right.
At least in a quick sort of way. The nice thing about corrective exercise is you can get really fast. You can fix you know, ankle mobility issues faster than you can grow 17-inch arms in most cases. So as we continue to go through my winding career here, and I apologize if this is a little long, but you know, I ended up falling in love with the corrective exercise thing. I ended up getting my bachelor's and master's. I go from New York Sports Club to Equinox, and I'm part of the Equinox EFTI training and development program. I eventually end up working for NASM as one of their instructors. In this period, right, I start realizing a couple of things. Number one, I'm kind of falling in love with the rehab side, right? And number two, I'm getting more and more upset with what I'm seeing in education, right? I realize in this industry that there is a lot of smart people who can't educate. They don't even think about it. They don't think about presentation skills. They don't think about retention, comprehension, application, all of those metrics that we would expect of a professional educator, but not necessarily a professional in our profession teaching, which is weird, which is a very weird thing. So I go back, I end up going, okay, I don't want to be a personal trainer forever. At this point, I've already done personal training for 10 years. And I was in one of those big box gyms for most of that, doing, you know, 100, 130, 140 sessions a month, plus teaching their trainers with various courses, whether they were on weekends or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I started looking for a way to kind of make my next move. A terminal degree was a big part of that, being a doctorate. Physical therapy allowed me to increase my scope, to bring in rehab, and give me the doctorate I needed to teach at any level.
Right.
Right. So I go in that path. And I start what becomes the Brookbush Institute by basically going, I have all of these things that I want to try. right? I want to try more sophisticated lesson plan development and see if I can help my colleagues retain this stuff better, enjoy this stuff more, right? I want to see if I can create a system that's a little bit more evidence-based than what we've seen. Like really not just cherry-picked research, but looked at all the research and tried to come up to the most accurate conclusions. And so that eventually winds me into getting my doctorate, building the Brookbush Institute, which goes through many stages as first a consulting company and then a workshop company. And then we moved online, right? And once I went online and created this membership model thing, which started 7 years ago, that's when the business started blowing up. That's when I started having revenue. We started scaling, started growing exponentially year over year over year over year. And that's what's led me to what I am now, which is truly trying to wear that chief executive officer mantle and what that means, which is, you know, we were joking before with like the chief everything officer. That's really what a CEO is. You kind of have to have your foot in like strategy and management, and you kind of have to know the different pieces of the company well enough to be able to put that all together. And you also have to be that guy, and this is, I guess, the exciting part about being a chief executive officer, is it CEO doesn't actually have a list of tasks that you have to be good at. What it's actually saying is like, you're the guy that's going to figure it out. Whatever it is, right? You're going to launch a plan to go international. How are you going to do that? Like, and there's like all these things that you have to figure out how to do, whether it's, you know, things with the website or things with languages or things with accreditation or things with marketing. And like, you have to be the guy to figure that out. So honestly, the CEO role was not something I enjoyed initially. I wouldn't recommend it to most people. Now I'm starting to see the power of this role. And I don't mean power in like I'm the freaking king. I don't mean power in like the domineering narcissistic way. I mean power in the sense of like the type of influence I can have when I have a team of really great people around me to help create this unified vision. Like you can get some monstrous stuff done, and that's very attractive to me, I think, and why I've started to like move even more and more into this executive role as my primary thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's always
funny. It's a long-winded way. You probably just got the most detailed version of my career that I've ever laid out.
I know you so well.
It was concise enough.
I always find it funny, like people, if you ask them their story, it's just this long, windy path of you're like, did you expect to do that 10 years ago? Be like, no.
Yeah, I can say, you know, I've given this piece of advice a couple other times. I don't care how much you love something. Chances are you'll be tired of it in 10 years. I think if a lot more people planned their life around that reality, they would be a lot happier long term. That doesn't mean you have to move into a different industry, or you know, if you love fitness, you have to totally get out of fitness, or like if you love physical therapy, you have to totally get out of physical therapy. But I would plan to go, okay, I was doing, you know, if I was a personal trainer, well, do you have interest in management? Do you have interest in having your own studio? Do you have interest in creating a business? Like, you know, like the Brookbush Institute, whether it's online coaching or, you know, whatever. There's different, or maybe you do want to go into the rehab thing like I did. Saying at the beginning of your fitness career that 10 years from now, here's some other things I might have interest in, will give you the time to slowly get another degree, slowly build up your knowledge of business, whatever the other thing is, so that you can make that transition and you don't do what most people do, which is I'm totally effing burned out and now I have to make a change, and I'm 5 years from being able to take that next step because I need a degree or because I don't have any management experience. And then you get really depressed for 5 years until you can make that happen, right? I think that would be my biggest advice to people is like, plan ahead, man. I mean, like I said, I didn't like the CEO role when I started, but you know, I used to love getting in front of people and teaching. I used to do anywhere from 30 to 40 weekend workshops per year.
Wow. That's crazy.
I'm not as excited about doing that anymore. You know, you do that for 10, 12 years and you kind of go, okay, this like flying all over the place. Yeah. Everybody's on Instagram is like, I love to travel. And I'm like, good for you. Because you realize at a certain point, travel is about late plane flights. It's about planes not taking off on time. It's about stressful journeys to the airport. It's about expensive back and forths. It's about being uncomfortable on planes. There's a lot of things that come with travel that aren't so good. So yeah, every 10 years, make a change.
Pretty much. I mean, that's just like even my research from year to year or 2 years, it's like, how the hell did I start doing this research? And I'm like, I didn't start out doing that.
No.
Yeah, it's just like, where did this come from?
The wonderful journey that it is.
So kind of talked a little bit about it, but what do you think was, if anything, 1, 2, maybe 3 major time points or major things that clicked in your head that said, I know this is what I want to do? And I know it's changed a lot, your occupations and fields, but it's like, is there any defining moments or moments that you go, yep, it reassures you this is what I want, or this is, I know where I'm at?
Yeah. You know, I think I went through that when I went through my career. Like obviously blowing out my chops, tearing my orbicularis, which ended my jazz career, that was a turning point. And there was no going back. Did I love that turning point? No.
Right.
To be quite honest with you. The idea of switching from being a really good jazz trombone player to being a fitness professional at that time was a tough transition. But I do know one thing. When I made that transition, the reason why I let it go ahead and take over is because I was never unhappy while I was training somebody. Right? I was always smiling when I was training. And although I didn't like the idea at the time of being a personal trainer, when I really thought long and hard about it, I enjoyed the work, right? So that was one big transition. I would say the New York Sports Club training and development program, meeting Mike Clark through that, falling in love with education, that was a huge tipping point, obviously. Like what I live for right now is education. So I would say that would be the second biggest tipping point. I would say getting through DPT school was the third, and for a couple really weird reasons. One, it gave me my scope of practice and ended my education career, which people think I love school. I actually don't. I don't love school. I was glad, you know, I put myself through 3, almost 4 degrees. You know, I worked and went to school for like 12 years. And that was hard. That was really, really hard. So that was good to be done. I enjoyed having the scope of practice to be able to do the things I knew would help people, which obviously having access to things like manual therapy and more advanced assessments and better thinking processes around assessment, having access to more continuing education, physical therapy did all that. And then the big negative that actually motivates me now, sometimes we have negative motivations and that's not always a bad thing, is I had always assumed that when I got to my doctorate, that I would find educators as dedicated as I was, right? That they were going to be on top of their lesson plans and improving all the time. They were going to have at least substantial public speaking skills. They were going to be good professionals themselves. They were going to be professional, act professionally. And what I found out was the total opposite. The least professional human beings I ever met in my life were tenured professors at my university. The worst educators I ever met in my life were at the doctorate that I took. That physical therapy program was such a miserable experience for 3 years. And the reason why this is a net positive in my life is because it tore down that wall of whether or not I could make improvements. Right? All of a sudden I got out of my doctorate and I went, no, I have ideas that could make this better. Like, this is obviously not good. Like, I'm not looking at people who like, oh my God, I could never be that good. Like, that's what I expected when I got into DPT school. And instead I got out and I was like, this is what people have been putting up with, right? So that like really was like a catalyst where I was like, no, Brookbush Institute is going to do this.
Yeah.
We're gonna change education. We're gonna make this better for our colleagues, because our colleagues deserve a lot better than what we're getting, or what we were getting.
Right.
Now with the Brookbush Institute, it's awesome. Plug, shameless plug. But you get what I'm saying, where it was like, yeah, I would say that was the other turning point, that DPT school, because it like just set that fire under me to like want to make change.
Yeah. I think a big thing for me too, because when you go through these science degrees and advanced degrees and you come out an educator, like I didn't think I'd be a professor. That wasn't like a thing in my head. And then you become it, and then you stand in front of the class, you're like, nobody ever taught me how to teach. All right, what do I do? And so what I like look at as I was going through, look back and say, all right, what did this professor do that was good? What did they do that was bad? And how would I want to be almost entertained if I was sitting in class, you know? And that's what it is. It's entertainment up there to keep engagement, especially with this cell phone age. It's just real quick and everybody's just looking down anymore. How to keep faces up and not just like, all right, or even keep them coming to class. Because, you know, with the online atmosphere now, it's like you get maybe half that show up because they know it's going to be recorded thing. So what, you know, what puts butts in the seat still and keeps them there? So.
Right. You got to be much more interactive. You know, to give you a little secret into the training and development program here at the Brookbush Institute, what we take our instructors through, we actually talk about a pyramid.
Okay.
So the most important thing, or the first thing you have to have, it's not the most important thing. The first thing you have to have is knowledge of the subject, right? Then the next presentation skill that we really work on with our instructors is clarity. All right. So can they speak clearly and concisely to relay that information? And then the last piece is engagement. And that's where the entertainment and the stories and the activities and their personality can come out. But it takes knowledge first, then the clarity, then the engagement. I think the interesting thing about university professors, here's an interesting fact that you all know but maybe never thought of, was we expect the people teaching our kids in high school to have a master's degree in education. But the teachers teaching our university students don't have to have a single class in education. I'm not saying that necessarily all university professors should also have a master's degree in education. That's asking for a lot. But to have nothing, that's a huge gap that we need to fill, and obviously we're trying to fill at the Brookbush Institute. You know, I definitely look into the education stuff, and I'm real big on the adult learning side. You can look up like Malcolm Knowles and the andragogical precepts. You know, we definitely have all of that stuff built into our lesson plans. So nice. We talk about all that stuff a lot. And a lot of that has to do with like student-centered learning. One of the things they're learning is these andragogical precepts actually work really good for students at a younger age too. It's really just kind of the way we should have been teaching. But it's that student-centered learning thing of like, the students need some direction over the path of their education. It should be more engagement and less dictation, right? Not easy to build a lesson plan that way, but it's definitely possible. And I think both the teacher and the student benefit, because even the teacher will enjoy the process a lot more. I think dictation gets old no matter how good or how much you like to hear yourself speak.
Brutal. Even during like master's, PhD, when you go to grad school, you're like, ooh, I want to learn this subject. And then you get in there and you're like, this is terrible. Like, you want the material, but it's just so bland or dry. You're just like, I can't take this.
Like how many topics did we get turned off of just because of bad teachers, not because we didn't like the topics themselves?
Right.
Exactly. One thing we're trying to work on right now, you'll laugh because this is a good example of this, is how do we teach statistics in a way that's actually enjoyable and people would want to remember it? Because you look at life is all about statistics, right? Life is probabilistic, but everybody I know has forgotten most of the statistics they ever learned. So we've been experimenting with some stuff on social media. If you see our social media content, we'll talk about like the null hypothesis every once in a while, or we'll teach about, you know, p-values or something. And what we're really doing is we're trying to experiment with how do we make this stuff engaging and entertaining and stuff that'll actually stick in your head so that you can use it when you're interpreting research later.
I know, it's stats. I teach grad stats, and it's always like, all right, here's the t-test. And it's like, this is not entertaining. So I have to like come up with something.
But then like, if you took for example, if you took a study and demonstrated how you could have used a t-test versus another commonly used statistical tool, and then how those two results compared and why you would use the two, and found it would be really powerful if you found an example where it made a big difference.
Yeah.
Right. Like they should have obviously used the t-test, but they used this other test. And because of that came to a conclusion that maybe wasn't as accurate. And this is how it would affect your workout, or this is how it would affect your physical therapy work. That's where we're trying to get. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think once we get there, it'll be a very different statistics class and something that people actually might enjoy.
Oh, definitely. I have to check that out. It's tough because there's so much logic involved that it's you can't teach logic.
I'm trying. I am definitely trying to teach logic. As much as I get trolled on the internet, I feel like all I do is teach logic. Like, that's an ad hominem argument. No, new is not better just because you said it was better. No, it's not logical. Yeah, logic we teach all the time. I actually think you could have a lot of fun with teaching logic, but myth busting, I think, is the way to go on that one. That would be my personal thing.
I'm big on like data visualization too. So if you look at like just a plain bar graph and then put in the actual data points where each individual sits, and then, all right, now relook at it. How does it like determine, or within the bar bias? I don't know if you've ever come across within the bar bias of showing a bar graph and like what's the probability of points in or out of the bar happening. Okay. And most people pick that it's within the bar, it's going to happen. Even if it's at the bottom of towards the axis, they'll pick that dot of more likely to happen because it's just simply because it's in the bar, like outlined in there. Yeah.
So then you just got to bring this all back to real world examples. This is gonna be fun. We'll figure it out. You'll have to definitely talk more as we start building these courses out.
Oh yeah, that's probably one of my favorite concepts within the bar bias, or Goodhart's law. I don't know if familiar with Goodhart's law.
I'm not familiar with Goodhart's law.
It's once you make the measure knowable, so the outcome variable, once you make the outcome variable knowable to whoever you're measuring, then the basically the measure becomes invalid. It's no good anymore.
It's like Schrodinger's what is it,
Schrodinger's cat thing?
Yeah, it's like almost one of those type of examples. Yeah. You can observe or measure, but you can't do both.
Yeah, because it
makes sense.
An old nail company is the story. A nail company said, we're just going to measure you on productivity, how many nails you make. And they said, okay. And so the workers knew it. So they just started making very tiny nails and they made a lot of them. And then they said, well, we're going to go by the weight, the weight of the nails that you make. So the tiny nails wasn't, good enough. So to just go by the weight, one real big weight nails. So so every time you change the outcome variable, they change to try and just beat the system.
That makes sense. I like that.
All right. So what are the necessary qualifications to do what you do?
Well, personal training, you guys know, certified personal trainer certification is what you need. To be successful as a certified personal trainer, you need to hustle. And I think a lot of physical therapists give CPTs a hard time, not realizing how hard it is for CPTs because they have to go find their own clients.
Yep.
A lot of physical therapists just get handed all of their patients, and it's like, yeah, you wait until you actually have to sell to make money.
Right.
Good luck. So there's that. There's the hustle and the CPT certification from the trainer side that I, of course, have. Obviously, to be a physical therapist, you need to be licensed.
Right. You
can't do any sort of manual therapy, any sort of physical rehabilitation without a license. You could be a DC, you could be an ATC, you could be an OT. They're part of the rehab family, right? DOs, I guess, could be part of that rehab family too. But you definitely need a degree and a license. For writing for the Brookbush Institute, you need a master's degree. To teach for the Brookbush Institute, you need a minimum of a master's degree. That has to do with a couple things. Because we're evidence-based and because everything's built on reviews, we want you to have experience with having done like a master's thesis or some sort of research review for your master's degree or a capstone project for your doctorate. And then also because of accreditation, it's pretty easy for me to use master's degree individuals to develop content and get it accredited for everybody.
Right.
PTs and PTs included. You get below a master's, and accreditors for physical therapy, chiropractors, and ATCs in particular, which we offer CECs for, right? Those organizations start looking at you funny. They're like, why is this personal trainer with a bachelor's degree qualified to write a course for a chiropractor with a doctorate?
Right.
And that's not, I'm not putting down personal trainers, but personal training certifications don't give us any grief for a chiropractor writing a course for personal trainers, but the other way around doesn't work. So from a business standpoint, I can only hire so many people. I only have so much revenue. It's a lot easier to hire one person who can do all of it than to try to hire people at the bottom who are very limited in their scope, and I can only give a certain type of work to.
Right.
As far as the executive thing, I read a lot. I am one of those executives you hear about where I read 70 to 100 books a year, mostly through Audible. You have to. You have to be an idea generation machine. You're always researching something, and if you're not reading a ton and you want to run a company, you want to build a company, I would put my money on you getting squashed by your competition. I don't know how else to say it. I just
do you have the probability on that?
Yeah, well, that the probability for businesses being successful is like not really that great. So maybe that's one of the key reasons. That would be
might be it. Yeah.
Like if you read enough, you'll figure it out. If you don't read enough, you won't. And you'll eventually run into that problem that tanks your company.
There you go. Oh, it's funny. What would you say? What do you read most about?
Great question. It's changed.
Okay.
Right. So, when I was trying to build the writing team up, I read a lot about English. I really took the role of editor-in-chief very seriously.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how am I going to correct people's grammar? How are we going to create a training and development program that teaches people how to use better grammar and structure sentences in a way that are more clear? How do I get them to write better paragraphs? Like, I took that really, really seriously. Probably overall, the thing I read most about is marketing.
Okay.
I have joked, but I'm half serious about it. At this point, I probably could step into the chief marketing officer role for a lot of digital startups. I mean, I'm a savvy digital marketer at this point.
Nice.
And you can understand why that would be so beneficial from a business standpoint for our company, right? We're an online, one of the first Netflix style education platforms, $19.99 a month, right? That SaaS model, the software as a service membership model is not very common in our industry, but is extremely common in other industries.
Right.
So there's a lot of information to get. You just have to read a lot about a lot of other companies that are doing parts of what you're doing. Right? Netflix is a big one for us. Amazon is a big influence for us. Who's another one that I read about a lot? I'd have to think about it a little bit, but those are two big keys where it's like, people are like, so who's your big mentor? And I'm like, and they're like, what? Right? Like, but like currently all I can think about is, I'm always reading research. Don't get it the wrong way. Like that's a lot of my day is spent doing content development. But when it comes to the executive stuff, like I'm looking at like these guys who like, I mean, you think about the scale of Amazon, it's like mind-boggling. How did you go from 0 to that?
Right.
So there's a lot of secrets in there. There's a lot of lessons to be learned.
That's awesome. All right. So obviously there are no typical days, but how's your day kind of structured? What would you do from, I know there's no 9 to 5, but. I mean, I'm getting better. I think in the beginning it was like a free for all the time. Yeah.
But I actually taught a couple business lectures. And the lecture that I came up with was the most important thing you can learn is what to do with your time each day. If you just think about how to make your day as productive as possible, you'll head in the right direction eventually, right? You'll eventually figure it out. So what I personally do is I get up and I look through all of our numbers and all of our emails, and all of our messaging, and I get all of that cleared up. And what I'm really looking for is making sure that everything is moving along smoothly. We are a virtual company. We don't have an office. All of my employees are all over the place.
Oh, okay.
So for me, email is like the first place I would see any obstructions keeping somebody from being able to do their job. Right? If I have a piece of information that one of my guys needs, I needed to get it to them as soon as possible so that they're not sitting there doing nothing. Right? Quote unquote. They always have plenty of stuff to do. So I get through all of that first thing when I get up in the morning. Now, usually I'll take a break. I'll listen to whatever business book I'm working through. I do books on Audible, and I'll do some exercise. Now, sometimes that's hard resistance training. Sometimes it's just some corrective exercise to recover from the day before or whatever, but I'll do a little exercise. Then what I try to program in, and this is the hard part, is deep work time. And if you guys have never read that book, Deep Work is a great book, but I try to shut off all my devices and get my writing done.
Nice. Because
those lit reviews that all of our courses are based on is definitely the hardest thinking I do all day. And I'd love to get 2 hours a day every day. It doesn't usually happen. I usually end up getting a couple 60-minute days and maybe even a 30-minute day in my week and have to make up for it later in the week. But ideally, I'd have 2 hours to 3 hours every day of hardcore deep work time. After that, I go into management. I usually have 2 to 3 meetings a day with whether it's my marketing team, my web development team, my live education manager, whoever, right? We have weekly meetings. And then usually I'll go for another walk, maybe eat something. Somewhere in there I eat. And then I come back, and usually the last part of my day is done with some creative-ish marketing tasks. Although my marketing team, we recently added a really talented director, and I had and still have another social media marketing manager who's great. There always seems to be something I need to keep my head wrapped around with marketing, whether it's a campaign or a carousel for Instagram. So being that work is more creative and less like mathematically, logically taxing, like a lit review is, it works best for me to have that at the end of the day. If I put it at the beginning of the day and try to put the writing at the end of the day, that doesn't work out as well. And all that stuff, by the way, guys, all this stuff I'm talking about how my day is laid out, you can find in deep work. This is what works best for me to be as productive as possible. Now, usually somewhere in there, probably have a couple sessions thrown in during the week. Maybe that takes the time of one of my walks on a Wednesday or a Saturday or whatever. I do work 7 days a week. Weekends, sometimes they're shorter days, but depends on what's going on. Entrepreneur life is not, it's not the life that people think it is. I think.
No Rolls Royces and parties.
Oh no. So startup CEO. You know what that stands for? Broke until first sale. That's what that stands for. Until I get that first liquidation event and that first Series A funding round, whatever you guys want to call it, like until I sell out, there's no Rolls Royces. I would rather, my friends will be like, I just bought a Tesla, and I'm like, I just bought a marketing director. It's like I would rather grow the business. So that's kind of where that falls in. But there's no work I would rather do. I think that's really important. I think those of us who are entrepreneurs, our work means a lot to us. And what we're trading is a lot of that personal pleasure stuff for a work life that's exactly what we want, or is the work life that we want. Have I had to sacrifice stuff personally? Absolutely. Definitely a different type of statistic. I don't think that like being a CEO is like this like weird, unique, oh, I'm so special. It's more like, well, no, I'm just the typical city guy who put work before family, right? I'm single, I don't have kids, but I got a company. So that's the trade-off. You know, I think it's unfortunate how hard it is to be successful in this country.
Mm.
You know, that caste system is definitely something I feel, and I hope that our education platform makes it easier for individuals to step out of that.
Mm.
But yeah, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're looking at 10 or 15 years of lockdown. Like that's most of the entrepreneurs I know, most of the CEOs I know, most of the guys who really made it, right, and got to that financial freedom point. It was 10 to 15 years of lockdown, and if they did that with family, man, their spouse is something special. Like takes the right type of person to stay with somebody like that.
That's support there.
Yeah, serious support.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I work, but it's not like I don't call it work. I just love to do it. I just have to do it. And I think a lot of people like yourself just have that drive. This is what I want to do with my time. But everybody judges you for it.
Right.
Well, it's like,
what am I supposed to be doing? Watching Godzilla on Netflix? Like,
yeah. Well, why don't you go out and do this and do that? It's like, but I like doing this. Why can't I do that?
And so I can go on my umpteenth weird date this week. Like what? Yeah.
Right.
Should we get into a conversation about online dating in New York City during COVID? Like, no, I'd rather be writing a lit review half the time. I'm sorry. For those of you in New York who know what I'm talking about, I'm sure you'd rather be writing a lit review too. Anyway.
That's funny. So what would be the favorite thing about your job? And least favorite? And least favorite?
Yeah, so favorite thing and least favorite thing. I know everybody would expect me to say least favorite thing. Oh, I don't have time to do other things. And that's actually not the least favorite thing. It's not the thing that bothers me the most. Not that it doesn't bother me, but it's not the thing that bothers me the most. My favorite thing, let's start there because that's the first question you asked, is that I'm actually pulling this off. You know, I think the fact that I had this crazy vision that I could somehow improve the education landscape and we're actually making it happen, it's a little nuts, right? Like the fact that I was like, why are we charging separately for CECs and certification? We should just bring that all together and charge the same for it. Yeah. And then I did it and it worked. What? And I got it all under, we're not going to charge $1,200 for a certification or $800 for a certification or $2,200 for a certification. Oh yeah, what are you charging? $19.99 a month. What? And it's working. And then I had this, I can get into all these things about the Brookbush Institute, which are built on all of these different tenets. But, the fact that we've made things so convenient, so accessible, we've removed so many obstacles in the way of the student. The fact that you can take one credit at a time almost. Courses are 1 to 4 credits long. Okay. You can take them from your phone. You can listen to half of our courses now.
Nice.
You can literally just turn them on in your car and be listening to these courses, right? And then that way, when you actually do have your study time, it's quicker and more productive. And take exams on your phone. You can fit this anywhere. And that was our goal. When I think about who is our colleagues, who are our students, who am I designing this for? I'm thinking about the busy physical therapist, the busy personal trainer, the busy mom who has a crazy schedule with multiple responsibilities and really needs that platform that they can fit in anywhere, right? Like I'm on my commute on the way to work. Great. That means we need an app, we need a work offline mode, and you need to be able to listen to it. Boom, boom, boom. We got all 3 of those things. All right, great. Nice. It needs to be short courses because what about the trainer or therapist who just had a cancellation? Right. Boom. Break it out. You got 1 hour. Let's do this. Oh, wait, but they're going to need to be able to access that really fast. Okay, we'll put a favorites menu We'll put a favorites menu together, right? So that you can favorite a course that you're working on. Okay. And rather than having to go back through the categories and find the course, all you have to do is go to favorites on your app or favorites on your desktop and boom, the course pops up right there. And it's bookmarked from where you left off. Nice. Right? Because we have to fit that in. Yeah. And then we're trying to get all of this with the credits to match so that it's not like you take a course and you just get CECs and a certification. It might count towards a master's degree, which means I will have put a master's degree in the palm of your hand, 1 credit at a time, for $19.99 a month. And I hope that scares the shit out of the whole post-secondary education system, right? Like, isn't that the way it should be? Like, why are you getting charged $30,000 for a degree that's mostly didactic information? I understand, as soon as you get in-person stuff that you have to do, expenses go way up.
Right.
And so I'm empathetic as a business owner that not every degree is going to be able to be fit into a $19.99 a month model, but there's no reason that didactic stuff can't.
Right.
Right. So I just said all that, and that sounds all exciting, but don't get me wrong. There are days I wake up and go, holy shit, it's happening. Maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but like, I'm like, I never would have imagined that I would be the guy, that I would be the guy to pull this off. It's like one of those things where I was telling you about Jeff Bezos, where I just like, I'm enamored, or like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go from zero to putting people in space?
Right.
What? That's an intense scale. Like, I can't think of how to organize that much, but that's really big. Of course, and the Elon Musk and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jeff Bezos, like they created scale that I don't even think they anticipated.
Right.
Just the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing is just that's my favorite thing of the job. Just like, holy cow.
That's amazing.
Now, what do I like least? What I like least is actually moving through society. It's kept me up at night for a very long time, and that is just the pervasiveness of absolutely irrational thought. This idea that because you believe it, it's the way it should be, haunts me. Like, it haunts me on every level. Like, if we put together a comprehensive literature review and go, here's the position statement, here's the conclusion we came from these 95 citations, and some troll on the internet goes, bullshit. And that sounds funny, and it is, when you're talking about some new grad punk who thinks that they, coming out of school, would know as much as an experienced professional who just spent maybe 100, 200 hours writing a review on this topic. It makes me a lot more pissed off, though, when it's a professor, when it's a respected, published researcher who says something that's absolutely irrational. Like, you are misinterpreting statistics. You being a statistics teacher, I mean, what's the most common thing I see? Right now, the favorite thing of the physical therapy profession is to cherry pick a systematic review, a retrospective systematic review, and treat a failure to refute the null as proof that everything is garbage, right? When me and you know that the null hypothesis is the nothing hypothesis, and that a failure to refute the null is probably, it doesn't prove anything, but even if we take it as, well, it proves that what was studied didn't actually come to a good, strong conclusion, yeah, it's probably as likely that you had a hypothesis generation error, or that regression to the mean happened because the quality of the research itself wasn't significant enough for that statistical tool. And we don't even talk about those things.
Right.
And the people who are using this idea of systematic reviews are the best research ever, despite the fact that they're retrospective, written by biased authors and are secondary sources, right? And I'm not talking biased authors as in, like, we all have bias.
Right.
As soon as you add an author's review on top of data, you have bias.
Right.
So, but this idea that, like, again, it's all irrational thought, but you see this all the time. I mean, I could name, and I won't, because I'm going to be a gentleman. I could name 20 researchers off the top of my head who've published reviews or published editorials that use reviews that make the mistake I just talked about. I cherry picked this systematic review. It failed to refute the null, which is why manual therapy sucks, which is why manual assessment sucks, which is why, whatever, IASTM doesn't work, which is why, we could go into all sorts of different topics, but it's like, this irrational thought, this nihilism, nothing works, basically to protect confirmation bias.
Right.
That probably frustrates me more than anything else, and that is definitely the least favorite part of my job. No.
Yeah, confirmation bias is always fun, and then conjunction fallacies and all that stuff. It's just ridiculous, and it always, you know, you're on social media, obviously, too, with the comments.
Give me 2 seconds here because I'm running just a smidge behind my next appointment.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. 10 minutes. When can we get there in 10 minutes? Sorry, I know I've been rambling a little bit.
No, that was all my questions, but we're free to bullshit about whatever. So
yeah, feel free to ask a couple more questions. The next thing I'm going to do is actually a Q&A with a university class, which is kind of interesting, with a former writer of the Brookbush Institute who's now a university professor, which is always kind of exciting and fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, what other questions you got? You have anything else for me based on some of the stuff that we've talked about?
Yeah, I was just funny thinking about that because Friday I have to guest lecture for my buddy's class. He's in Texas A&M. It's just like fitness myths. So what do you think is, what is your biggest couple, if you have a couple, fitness myths that just drive you insane, or you just
I published a whole book on fitness myths, right?
I know.
Yeah, I wrote fitness or fiction.
Just your top couple. I know I've read it long time ago when you published it, and I was like, oh, like I was thinking about making my own book recently about doing that same thing, and then it popped. I was like,
it definitely needs an update. So
co-authorship, what we're saying?
Huh?
So co-authors is what we're saying.
Sure. We can do co-authorship. I'll take it. Yeah, a couple myths that really bother me. Toning bothers me a lot. I'll tell you why toning bothers me a lot, because it pushes women in the wrong direction. And that hurts, like, here, you know what I'm saying? Like, you look at toning programs and it's like light weights, high reps, tiny movements, which means low caloric burn, very little muscle mass added, which means very low long-term chance of success. Right? All because of this fear factor of getting bulky. Right. Women are getting bulky by accident. You see a jacked woman in the gym, she worked 10 times harder than the jacked guy standing next to her, right? Like they have, females have much less testosterone, which is one of our primary growth hormones. So I would say toning is definitely one that just like drives me nuts. And then of course, like the weird ones that like people won't let go of, including physical therapists, like lower abs. You're like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, did you take exercise physiology? Right. Like, you don't know the all or none principle? You can't freaking target your lower bicep. You can't target your lower abs. Well, what are those little lines? Well, those little lines are just fascial reinforcement, right? They're called transcriptions. Like, they come from the fascial sheaths that leave your external obliques and internal obliques, transverse abdominis. Just because they're there doesn't mean you somehow can segment them out. And if you did segment your lower abs out, what did you think would happen? If your lower abs contract and your upper abs don't, your lower abs will stretch out your upper abs and nothing will happen.
I want to see somebody walk around with shredded lower abs and just like a gut on the top abs.
Yeah, it's so weird. And we see all sorts of weird versions of that myth too, like upper glute training, lower glute training. Why did somebody have a distal hamstring strain? Well, it's because they need to focus on distal hamstring strength. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't, I would say those two are probably the ones, toning. Yeah. And then the versions of that myth of like, you can target part of a muscle. I'm like, all right, so we're just going to take all of the physiology we learned and the book that we used, whether it was, Saladin or Guyton or whatever we used, and we're just going to toss it out the window because, I'd rather do leg raises.
Pretty much. And then what do you think, other than jumping off back to education, what do you think is the biggest like qualm you have with higher ed? I have my own qualms with it. And so what do you think we just do wrong in higher ed, grad school or PhD or whatever, even undergrad?
I think I mentioned all of it during this conversation, right? So the failure of educators and education institutions to attempt to reduce obstacles between the student and actually getting the education. If education programs would think like Amazon with the one-click purchase, right? How do you make education single-click convenient? Like that's what I think about every day. How do and you could tell, like when I was talking about the different design features in the app, right? I'm thinking about, think about the obstacles that you actually have and how do you get around them?
Right.
I think that's one. Second, educators need to learn how to educate. And if you don't, get out. And it won't matter, honestly, because what's happening with the Brookbush Institute of trying to put a master's degree on an app, which allows a professional educator to have access to many more people, is going to end up being the best educators will have access to the students.
Right.
And those who can't educate will no longer have jobs. Right?
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of for that. I'm sorry. I don't like to see bad teachers get in front of rooms. Now, if you're bad and you're trying to get better, my hat's off to you. As long as the effort's there,
right,
with you. It's the ones who don't put in the effort.
Oh yeah.
And then third, you know, which is part of the obstacle thing, but has become a caste system in this country, has become a social issue that we're very big on, is cost. And it's both sides. It's the fact that you're expected to take time from working to not work for years,
right,
to then spend $30,000. It's getting to the point where only the rich can do this, or only people who have parents who are, my parents didn't pay for this shit.
Right.
You know, excuse my French, but like I put myself through school. It was hard. It left scars.
Yeah.
All of those long days of long school days, plus work shift, plus study, over and over and over and over and over again. Right? Like, that's gotta go. And if you can't understand that as an educator, I don't have empathy for you when your university goes underwater. Right? Like I don't. You know, this is, you know, we talked about in the beginning, what were the pivotal moments and the DPT program being so bad. This is what that's led to, is this conversation right here where I'm just like, if you sink, I don't care. Right? And I know that sounds horrible because maybe you had a professor that you really liked in school, but you know, when you look at even some of the racial issues that have come to light over the last year during the pandemic, and you know, I can't talk to that, right? I can't. I'm a white male, right? What am I going to say? But what I can do is I know that education is a piece of that puzzle, and that if people, you know, if I make a degree available for $19.99, and a master's degree is just a start, right? We're not going after a bachelor's because with a bachelor's I have to have all those liberal arts courses that I'm not the one qualified to write those. But if I can set the example with a master's degree, and we can get to a point where people can get degrees for $19.99 a month that are respected, that help get them better employment in an information age, that does a lot to bring this social fabric back together, right?
Sure.
So we got a little serious there at the end. I know we're having fun, but you know, that is the social issue that I'm very involved or passionate about. Like, I know that that's where I can have the biggest impact. I'm going to keep fighting. Obviously, we're going to make things more convenient. Hopefully, we can influence the industry in that way. I'm going to try to be the best educator I can, create training and development programs that create incredible educators. Hopefully, we pull people with us. And then hopefully our price point takes this cost monster and like just undercuts the whole thing, just the way Netflix undercut Blockbuster. You know, like
100%.
all of a sudden you add convenience and price, and Blockbuster went.
That was it. And now the show, The Last Blockbuster, is on Netflix.
Yeah, I watched it. It was actually great. It was totally great.
I do have to watch that. It's pretty funny. But I know you got to get going, but just any quick last words of advice, just to leave us with a good message?
Have an education game plan. Be ready to change your career every 10 years. Love what you do, and know that the Brookbush Institute has got your back. So I guess my biggest last words of advice were sign up for a membership. And I might be a little biased. If you don't want to sign up for a membership, at least get on our social media platform, because we obviously give away a ton of information.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Even on your website, you have a ton of info. Free info.
Yeah. We're all about it, man. You can tell. I hope in this conversation, at the very least, people can tell how much I care. And how much this isn't, yes, I'm a business owner. Yes, I'm a CEO, but obviously, like, I'm not in this for the money. It's Jeff Bezos talks about missionaries versus mercenaries. Mercenaries are after money. Missionaries are dedicated to a cause.
Yeah.
And I hope I definitely have shown that I fall on this side of the missionary spectrum. But yeah, obviously the finance does help create these projects that we have to take on that do cost money and manpower. And so, if you guys can get memberships, we're like Netflix. We're $19.99 a month. You got a 30-day money back guarantee. You can cancel anytime. It's really the way it should be. Perfect.
Well, once again, definitely appreciate it, Brent, for you coming on and talk to it. 100%. You seem dedicated to the task, and that's what I respect. I respect 100% that you can just see it when you talk about it, like the passion that you have. Yeah. So definitely going to hit you up with that within the error or within the bar bias stuff. I'll send that over to you.
Oh, please. And yeah, man, keep in touch, because you could be a guy that we really need to lean on to create these statistics courses. It's a much bigger project than even what I'm letting on to right now, and it's going to take a couple of years, but you need to stay in touch. There's definitely work there.
That's the fun stuff.
For sure. And we'll get on Instagram Live too. Let's do that.
Yep, sounds good, Brent.
I'm gonna hold up a board.
All right, man. You take care. All right.
You too.
All right. See you, Brent.
See ya.